hello and welcome to the Georgian Book Club. So I have the first of 4 videos that I promised you that we'd do 4 different things in a particular series. So I have the first video of that series, which will run until the end of the year. So any of my videos, there'll be 3 more of them, and they'll go till the end of the year. But before we get to our book and what our series is, remember there is our shop where we have books and writing services if you want to support us. We also have our Redbubble shop where we have over 100 designs. So if you want to support us in that way, you can. Otherwise, like, subscribe, comment, and share, because those all help these videos get out there. I like to talk to people in the comments. So what are we looking at? Well, we are looking at Horace Walpole's The Castle of Ontranto. Yes, it's a Gothic. Yes, last time I read a Gothic, I said, I'm never reading a Gothic again. Why? Because I don't like the Gothic. I don't like the Gothic. This didn't help. This did not help my dislike of the Gothic. It's like, oh, we are doing this because it will pay off for the next 2 videos. Partly is because with the essay on criticism, Pope's essay on criticism, where we talked about Dryden being the sort of a weird intermediary writer between the earlier writers like Milton and then a writer like the Augustan writers like Pope and Swift. Then likewise, at the other end of the century, you have a similar selection of these intermediary writers that lead up to the Romantics. So you don't just go, bam, Romantics. You actually have to get there. And this is one of the books that gets us there. Also, Horace Walpole is really important in the next writer's story. And I thought, well, I can either eat up half of his video or explaining who Horace Walpole is, or I just read The Castle of Ontranto and then you'll be all up to speed. So we're doing this. So who is Horace Walpole? Horace Walpole is the youngest son of Sir Robert Walpole, you know, the Prime Minister, the 18th century Whig Prime Minister. He is the youngest son. He's also the 4th Earl of Oxford. So we are talking super posh. And he's an antiquarian. And why do I emphasize that Horatio Walpole, or Horace Walpole, was the 4th Earl of Oxford and the youngest son of Sir Robert Walpole, the Prime Minister? Well, you'll see. But needless to say, the power differential between Walpole and our next writer is significant and does play a very big role in his story. But Horace Walpole is primarily known as an antiquarian, which is sort of like a precursor to a historian. History is a really weird, I call it like, let's call it science. It has a very unusual sort of history itself. The history of history is historiography, which is something that I really actually enjoy looking at, is historiography of the way that people understood history. It can be really fascinating. So Horace Walpole is an antiquary. He is not what we would see as a historian. He's not using a historical method that we would understand it. If you go to university today and train to be a historian, my undergraduate degree is in history, primarily. The bulk of my degree is history. You're not going to end up doing it like Horace Walpole did. But Horace Walpole began to become interested in the idea of the Gothic. Now, the Augustans, which is very much within their name, the Augustans are classicists. So Fielding, Pope, Swift, they are looking back to ancient Rome, back to ancient Greece, and it's probably why their primary style is satire, because satire is a very ancient mode. It's a very powerful mode that is used in ancient literature for comedic reasons. And, you know, the 18th century is famous for its satire. So how do you go from famous for their satire to this thing? Well, remember, and I think a lot of people will know this because it's one of the most popular videos on my channel, is remember Sterne's Sentimental Journey, and I explain sentiment, the idea of powerful emotion. Well, that's what gives us this stuff. This is an offshoot of sentimental literature. That's a really weird offshoot. And so Horace Walpole, as I was saying, is very interested in the idea of the Gothic. And what is the Gothic? The Gothic is looking not to Greece and Rome, as the Augustan writers do, but looking to Northern European history. Northern European medieval and, you know, Dark Ages history. This is the world of the Gothic cathedral. This is a world that by Horace Walpole's time is very, very safely dead, which is part of the reason why he's playing with it. It is very safely dead in 18th century, mid-18th century Protestant England. He would not be playing with this mode if he did not think that the Gothic was actually dead. Why do I say that? So, what is this thing? This thing is about 100 pages. The original preface purports to be a found document, a genuine medieval document from Italy, found in the house of a great northern lord, and then translated from Italian into English. That was in the first preface. The second preface is, oh no, I made it all up, but also explaining his concept of the Gothic. So the second edition is not pretending to be real, authentic, but acknowledging its actual constructed quality, which is pretty well just as well, because the amount of times this man quotes Shakespeare or creates Codd's Shakespeare for his book, it makes you just go, if you know Shakespeare, you're like, this seems a little bit suspect. Walpole? Why would Sicilian aristocrats of the Crusader times know Shakespeare? Come on, Horace. Cough up. What are you doing? Why is he able to do this in the mid-18th century? Because Shakespeare's not really well known. Garrick is currently on the stage in the mid-18th century reviving Shakespeare as a concept. Plays are being sort of, you know, let's give this a happy ending, let's do this. It's very, 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 very pre the deification of Shakespeare. In fact, the world that this book ushers in will usher in the deification of Shakespeare as well, which has some major problems of its own, which we will get into. So anyway, this claims to be a Sicilian manuscript. I only know it's Sicilian because I read the introduction, because is there anything in here that says, oh look, it's Sicily? No, not a bit. Not a thing says Sicily to me. Okay, I don't like Gothic novels, so this is kind of going to be our tone. I'm sorry if you do. So it purports to be a manuscript of this ghostly haunting of the Duke, or the someone of Ontranto, whose son is killed by a giant helmet, and then eventually via hauntings and secret tunnels and mistaken identities and lost children and found children and all of these sorts of things, we end up finding the true inheritor of Ontranto, the person who's meant to be the Prince of Ontranto. It's 100 pages and I really struggle to read this, because what makes this different from some of the other short things, because, you know, I'm not going to rip this to shreds by saying it's so unbelievable. No, Rasselas is unbelievable. Candide is unbelievable. I really enjoyed Candide and Rasselas. So why does this one annoy me to bits? But I'm quite happy to go with the fable of Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia. Or I'm quite happy to go with Candide and Dr. Pangloss and This is the Best of All Possible Worlds. Why am I able to do that, but I balk at this? That's the really interesting question with this book, because I balked at this. I was reading and I'm like, oh, please end soon. Please end soon. And it's a similar sort of thing that I have for all the Gothic stuff. And it is because, taking the other two I mentioned, Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia, Candide, with our optimism, they're about something. They're actually about something. Candide, but Dr. Pangloss says this is the best of all possible worlds, and he gets thrown into the world only to discover, my God, an awful lot of awful stuff happens here, and maybe Dr. Pangloss is wrong. Maybe this is not the best of all possible worlds. Maybe it's not possible to make the best light, put everything in its best possible light. Maybe you actually need to agitate for change, because this is not the best of all possible worlds. That's interesting. I mean, the auteur de fait doesn't prompt him to this. The being caught up in wars doesn't prompt. The thing that finally prompts Candide is actually slavery that prompts Candide. The cruelty of the slaves in the South American colonies is finally what prompts Candide to go, you know what, I can't best of all possible worlds myself out of this one. And that's what gives Candide its great power. Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia, is asking, how does one live a good life? Is there one secret method? And he goes through and sees all these different people, he and his companions. They meet all these different people, and all these different people have all sorts of methods for living a good life, only to find that they crumble under pressure. And ultimately, living a good life is making a choice to be happy sometimes, and making that choice for you individually, not imposing that upon another person. They're very interesting stories, and you travel along with them, even though they're not believable. They're told in a very telling manner. There is almost no character development apart from the overarching development of going from searching to coming to a resolution. But they are still satisfying because they have some higher ideal behind them. They have a higher idea, and so you're willing to suspend your disbelief and watch what is essentially a fairy tale in order to engage with this concept. This has no concept. This has nothing. This has mood. This has sensation. But it's not saying anything. And because it's not saying anything, and because the characters are so poorly developed, there isn't any sense of urgency. There isn't any sense of engagement with these characters. They're flat as flat. And I really found myself struggling with, why should I progress with this? Which is not what you want to be doing when you're reading a book. You don't want to be sitting there thinking, why am I progressing with this? Well, I'm progressing with this because I need to do a video. And I need to have actually finished the thing because I can't get away with saying I got bored and 50 pages from the end. Because that's really, really terrible thing to say. But this was a big seller in its day. This thing was really influential. Why? This created an entire genre. Why? Why did this boring book satisfy people in a way that to a modern reader you look at it and think, what on earth is that? Because it's very naive, the writing, but it is taking the sentimental, and remember I said with the sentimental of the 18th century is often sick-making to modern readers because it's so much. It's like they overdosed on this stuff. Well, the idea of this is it's taking the sentimental, but it's pushing it not into the feeling for someone else, but to manipulate you into feeling frightened. Now, Walpole also had another aim in mind. He had another aim in mind, and his other aim in mind is very, very particular. Now, he writes about this in an essay that he had written a couple of years before the Castle of Ontranto, where he talks about architecture, and he's talking about the merits of Gothic architecture. And he says, one must have taste to be sensible of the beauties of Grecian architecture. One only wants passion to feel Gothic. So for Walpole, the Gothic is about feeling. It is about creating an atmosphere. And this creating an atmosphere is something that the Romantics will pick up and run with. This idea that, you know, this concrete world that the Augustan writers are working in, that wonderful concrete world of Tom Jones, that wonderful concrete world of Tristram Shandy, gets swept away in exchange for feeling. So for the Gothic writer, for the Romantics, so the Gothic being proto-Romantic, for the Sturm und Drang writer in Germany, for the Romantic composers, the Beethovens, the Schuberts, the important thing is feeling. Now, this obviously doesn't influence the late classical composers, people like Mozart. Mozart isn't really about feeling. Mozart is still frothy and fun. Much like the classical period, much like the Augustan writers. So musically, it takes a little bit longer. Berlioz is probably your prime example of a romantic composer. But it also, you have that feeling. You get it in Wuthering Heights. You get it in Sir Walter Scott. The Gothic becomes this incredibly important stepping stone to that romantic feeling, that primacy of feeling. Now, why is this able to do it? What is it using to create this? Because none of those things have anything in common stylistic, or not stylistically, content-wise. That's one of the other really interesting things, is you don't see a lot of the content being picked up across all of these different things. A lot of the storm and stress stuff of the German literature is a lot more grounded in reality than the romantic and the Gothic English stuff. So thinking of things like Schiller's plays, although they're huge, tempestuous emotion, they're not grounded so much out of the real world. They're just big emotion. Like Love and Intrigue is one of those. Or Werther. Werther is one that is big emotion, but it's not exactly a fairy tale. It's not exactly a fairy tale the same way this feels. So this one is Shakespeare. Why is Shakespeare in here? Why on earth has he gone and roped Shakespeare into this thing? For Walpole, the Gothic is a mood which he really attempted to bring into his house at Strawberry Hill. But it's also evoking an England that no longer exists. It is evoking an England where there is a very sharp dividing line between them and us. And that dividing line is the Reformation. For Walpole, the Gothic is those ruined abbeys, those destroyed convents and monasteries. The Gothic is the world that was before we were enlightened. It is a playground that we can play in. It is Catholic. It is not a coincidence. It is not a coincidence that this is supposedly an Italian manuscript found in a northern estate. The northern parts of England were seen as the last strongholds of Catholic England. So the Gothic is also Catholic. And for as much as things like the Scottish witch trials, James I and his absolute terror of witches, the proliferation of demonology books of that period, for as much of that, which are not actually Catholic things, they're Protestant things, the world of ghosts and spectres is seen as a Catholic one, not a Protestant one. So it's a very unusual sort of divide that Walpole creates. So for him, the Gothic is hearkening back to a very dead, very important that it is dead. He is not romantically, nostalgically looking to this Catholic world and wanting to bring that back. Oh, no. He is very establishment. He is very modern. but he is looking back with a degree of really cosplaying medieval Britain, of saying that there is a value to this stuff that we have just spent a century or about 2 centuries eradicating. Now that we've eradicated it, we can look at it and play with it. We can, cosplay being superstitious Catholic medieval people. It's also a challenge to the Greek and Romans, which Walpole is wanting to challenge them, because and this is where where this becomes important for the deification of Shakespeare, because I did both of these prefaces. I did both Pope and Johnson's preface to Shakespeare. Now, both Pope and Johnson commented on the fact, Pope especially, commented on the fact that Shakespeare's plays do not adhere to classical dimensions of plays. They are not, they're not proportioned in the way that the ancients and the classics determine plays should be written. So Shakespeare is, up to this point, not like, it is something that, well, it's there, but, it's a bit old-fashioned now. It's not really our taste. What Walpole does is he folds Shakespeare into this new genre of saying this is an example of the Gothic within English language. Because it's interesting, he uses Shakespeare and not Chaucer. Chaucer is technically a far more Gothic, as in high medieval period, but Chaucer is sort of more bouncy and fun. Shakespeare fits Walpole's conception of the Gothic. And which plays does he use? He's pulling from some very specific plays. Now, Shakespeare is a large body. Shakespeare's work is a large body of work. But he pulls from some very particular plays. He pulls from Hamlet. He pulls from Macbeth. He pulls from, I think, Caesar and Richard III. And what do these 4 plays have in common? They all have ghosts. There is Banquo in Macbeth. There is Hamlet's father in Hamlet. There is the visitation of the murdered family in Richard III. And there is Julius Caesar also visiting the murdered Caesar at Philippi in Julius Caesar. So there are ghosts in all 4 of those plays. And it's that ghostly element, not the political element, not a lot of the other elements of Shakespeare, that Walpole is bringing to the fore and saying, look, this is what English culture of this period looks like. It's you've got this gloom, you've got ghosts, and what's more, for Shakespeare, which is important for Walpole and actually makes Walpole stand out from all his imitators, is in Walpole the ghosts are real. Now, you can watch a version of Macbeth, and whether we see the bloodied Banquo or not is directorial option, but we're generally led to believe that the bloodied Banquo does appear. It's such a trope that I was watching Blackadder 1, The Foretelling, which plays on that. Richard III turning up in Blackadder's bedroom going, well, the battle went fine till someone chopped off my head. taunting him and tormenting him. These are images that have become so familiar to us. For Walpole, the ghost has to be real. The ghost has to be real. It cannot be a figment of someone's imagination. It has to be this unearthly presence that comes in and puts things right, the same way that these unquiet dead in Shakespeare go and say, "You killed me, this needs to be avenged." Because all of those ghosts are avenging ghosts. They are all of them ghosts that are saying, "I was murdered, and either I'm going to drive you nuts," or, you know, Banquo is haha, you killed me. I'm just back for, you know, just to really embarrass you in front of all the noblemen, huh? Yeah, please have a breakdown. Have a breakdown. You had me butchered, you bastard. You know, old Hamlet's ghost is, "I was murdered. Okay, I now charge you to bring my murderer to justice, to avenge me." Caesar and the ghosts in Richard III are all, "Lose heart and die in the battle, you scum." So they are real ghosts in Hamlet, in Shakespeare, and they're real ghosts in Walpole. This, I will give it, this does not have the Scooby-Doo sort of ending. He at least commits to the ghost being a ghost. So I've got to admire him for that. But it is not a book that I would have read. It's not a book I would have read. Look, if you want to understand how the Gothic works, read it. If you want to understand a work that is sort of proto-romantic, that's heralding the Romantics, have a look at it. If you want to be scared, forget it. It's not going to scare you. If you want to be bored out of your mind, be my guest, because I was. I had to force myself to read this thing. There are other things that I want to read, and this was not it. So, as a reading experience, boring. As a historical piece, interesting. And as explaining who Horace Walpole is, that is why we had a look at it. So next time, I will be bringing you another of these transitional writers. This is a writer who has fallen very much out of favour. He was very, very, very popular in the late 18th and well into the 19th century. I'm actually really surprised at how much he has fallen, how rapidly his descent from consciousness has been, because I look at all the book people, and I have not seen him once. And so I'll be bringing him next time. So yeah, that should be really, really interesting. And then I've got a third writer to bring, which is going to be split into two different videos, because I want to bring the writer himself, and then the response is very, very interesting, because the response brings us Johnson, and you know I like Johnson. You know I like a little bit of Dr. Johnson. So that'll be what we're looking at for the rest of the year here. I'm also going to say some of us may not turn up all that much over the next few months. Some of the writing that we read is not really compatible with what we do off camera. So it's very possible that Otterline may not be around. Laura will probably be around. We might be getting more Caesar, and certainly Her Infernal Majesty will be around. Might be able to manage some Janice, but Janice has had a really poor run of books lately, and I think she might be sulking a bit. I personally wouldn't blame her for sulking. I would be sulking if I had to read that many books that were not to my taste exactly too. Ottoline is the one we're probably not going to see a lot of, because she does early 20th century and interwar stuff and is really not compatible with what we're looking at. Janice might find something, if we can find something satirical. I think Laura will find something, but it might be kind of a bit odd. So you're going to have to perhaps put up with me and Her Infernal Majesty and Caesar and Hatter for a while, because things are running at about 1 million miles a minute off screen, and just some things are not at all compatible with that, especially if they're a bit serious. Comedy and tragedy, although they're either side of that famous mask, they don't always gel so well. But anyway, I will see you again. I will bring you the next installment in this series. And until then, farewell. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.